Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Um, so I'm going to talk about energy sanctions, and you heard about it a lot now. And thanks to Petrus and Daniel, I think you almost know everything. So I had to, since I was the last one, I was not sure how to present, what to present. But I wanted to say what else can be done, right? So to some extent, we know it's been what you call current energy sanction against Russia. You know, you heard about it. So crude oil, but also all refined petroleum products. You have oil also and other fossil fuel. And you have also sanctioned energy related product, right? So specific good technology for all refinery, but also any energy industry equipment technology. So not all the sanctions are follow, we heard this, but nevertheless, assume it is. The real question now is, what else? Um, and but also a second question, I think, and I think Petrus and Daniel also touched upon this: is it worth it to implement the sanction? Can we do something else? So I will talk about two potential sanction. One that you heard already about is about the LNG, right? So I will go quickly because you got already the figure, but I think I want just to mention it. And actually, I would also like to talk about the nuclear energy related product that is not often mentioned, but that has, I think, great potential. First, should we put sanction on Russian gas and more on specifically on LNG? So you heard the number. I think Peteras was really explicit on this. So, you know, at the end of the day, so this is a number, you have many numbers, but I think it's a little bit striking that 52% of the Russian LNG export is bought by EU, right? So, and this we talk between January and July, there's different explanation, but it is true, again, that it's comparing to a pre-war level, 2021, it's a jump of 40%. You can explain it. You don't use pipe gas. You still need, we're in an energy transition, so you still need gas. Well, you go for LNG, right? And it's true that Spain and Belgium are the second and third biggest importer. I don't mention France, but they are also in the list, right? So it's a little bit surprising. And of course, in March, there was this idea, there was a call from EU saying, okay, really asking the member state and the private companies to stop buying LNG, Russian LNG. And the real question is like, should the EU then ban the trade? And in order to answer this question, we know there's some issue, but when I'm saying, I ask myself also, should we go for it, given that some country, it's going to be really painful for some member state, for example, to reduce to find other LNG is going to be really costly. They're not maybe not ready. So is it worth it? And first one, and indeed this is the title of the session, right? So what is the impact on the Russian government revenues if we do that? So I don't have the right answer, but comparing to what Daniel was saying about the oil, definitely the LNG is not that big, right? So in terms of, again, if you look and you compare oil versus gas export revenue between January and November 23, right? It's like 1/4 LNG. So even if you think of doing something about gas, maybe you should focus on pipe gas, right? Because it's much more revenue for Russia. And what is even more annoying, I will say, is that if you only look at EU LNG purchases for their own consumption, it's only about 5.3 billion, right? So, to some extent, again, if you want to have a comparison and you look at the planned budget revenue for Russia, it seems that the impact is not going to be that much, right? 5.3. So, yes, maybe it's not so much, but this is only about number. And I think so far we've been talking about number, and I want to put one word or two words. Actually, it's a political influence. And that's going to be obviously a problem if now how we measure the political influence of Russia, and more importantly, how we reduce it. And then, of course, again, Petrus has been mentioning this issue about, to some extent, Europe is acting like a hub when you think about LNG, right? So there are 20% of Russian LNG import that go via the EU ports. So maybe indeed EU is facilitating not only so its own energy transition, but to some extent it's also helping Russia to find customers, right? So I'm not going to go to detail, but this is really interesting that EU is still playing this role of facilitator of trade, right? So that's, I will call it Russia LNG diplomacy, in a sense that in order, Russia is also selling his gas at much lower, at a much cheaper price. So to some extent, Europe is playing a strange role, I'd say. But let me move on to what is even more important. I think it's every Russian nuclear energy related products. So this is something I'm currently working on. I have some research project on nuclear, and this is obviously quite a technical topic, but I think it's important because in the current state now that we're talking about energy transition, and we do not want to use too much gas, nuclear is for many countries, including the developing countries, the solution if we want to get on the path of net zero, right? And it's important to know that when you talk about nuclear energy, there's a lot of steps before you're able to produce nuclear. And in particular, what we call the front-end nuclear cycle, where you buy the uranium, this is the natural uranium, but until you can put it in your nuclear reactor, it takes a lot of steps. And what is important, so I had some animation, but it doesn't matter. What is important to remember or to know is that Russia has a clearly dominant position here. So, it's like 50% of global enrichment capacity is owned by Russia, and enriched uranium is essential if you want to produce nuclear energy. But and also surprisingly, despite all the context, Russia is supplying 12% of the US uranium that are required to run their nuclear power plant, and 17% for Europe. Okay, so you have some trade here. And we know already that some countries that have Russian-built reactor relied also on Russian fuel, and even with West Wheelhouse, some country like Sweden managed to switch fuel. It was much more difficult for some member states, right? So to some extent, this dominant position is a little bit scary. So you may think, hey, should we try to do something? Well, again, if we only look at the budget and the revenue, well, you want to say that nuclear export, and this is all the nuclear related product, it's really little, right? 2.1 billion euro in 2022. So maybe you may think, hey, maybe that's not worth the effort. I mean, look at the budget, maybe we should try to do something else. And again, I want to go back to how do we measure, how we take decision and choose the sanction. Well, it has to be also that Russia has a nuclear energy diplomacy. You have the Rosatom, which is the Russian state nuclear corporation. And it is important to know that even pre-war, you had 73 different projects in 29 countries. And Rosatom is involved in building 33 new nuclear in 10 countries. So let me show you this map, which is tell you a lot about Russia nuclear engagement around the world. So what you have, and this is, you cannot, okay, I see. So what is important, I mean, there's a lot of detail and I was not hoping to show you everything. What is important is for you to realize that basically except in US, you have Russia, and Rosatom is involved in some nuclear project to some extent, whether it's selling fuel or whether it's also building a nuclear power plant. And this is stunning, and it could be really the share here. So in orange, you have this is the share of the energy supply, and then in the dark blue, it's how much this nuclear project is going to facilitate or is a share of the total energy. And what is important here to realize is that indeed what Russia is doing is that not only Russia is present, or Rosatom is present around the world in terms of nuclear energy, but it's also providing interesting block, but thank you, attractive financing scheme, right, for nuclear power plant. So, and this is important. So again, we're not saying that what Rosatom is doing is that not only they offer the technology, but what they also combine it with is to financing a scheme that allow countries to pay for their nuclear power plant. So this is the case for Hungary, for example. So the Russian loan covers 80% of the 2 units. And this is the case for also Bangladesh. And you have many cases where it's the Russian loan cover 90% of the project, right? And this is a commitment for 20 years. So to some extent, I want to argue that, looking at revenues, that's one thing, but looking also considering the political influence on the long term is also important. And to some extent, the example of the nuclear is an interesting example because it's really a lock-in technology. So Russia, as soon as Russia will be in the country with its nuclear power plant, it's going to be difficult to not also being in connection with Russia. And just the post-Ukraine invasion, if that's also an indication that it could work. I mean, it's working in the sense that 7 of the 14 countries with high or medium nuclear cooperation, so there's been some classification, didn't back up the UN resolution against Russia aggression, right? So I think to conclude, sanction and energy sanction also is not just about reducing Russia government revenue now, it's also to limit or try to limit the Russia's influence in the long term. And well, the next step, we also have to offer some next step, but I think really, if you think, at least in the nuclear, you want to develop credible and affordable alternatives to Russia energy-related product, not only for Europe, but also for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.